This morning, returning from the parish church through the grounds of the monastery and therefore the graveyard to the hermitage, I paused and read again these lines. It's written on a recent grave, and the words are those of Oscar Wilde. To lie in the soft brown earth, with the grasses waving above one's head, and listen to silence, to have no yesterday and no tomorrow, to forget time, to forgive life, to be at peace. It reminds me of something written not far from where we live at home. It's a memorial to those essentially of the First World War, then the others were added. It's in Welsh, and it says something very similar, very pithy, given what was little short of an inferno there in the psalm. Peace contrasted with all that infernal noise and all that went with it. My friends, there will be peace also one day when our body is laid to rest. Peace apparently, but then it all begins. Will there be peace evermore? This gospel about the Good Shepherd makes one think of all those souls that were carried on the shoulders of that Good Shepherd. Have you ever been to Rome, to the catacombs? There one sees a very ancient fresco of the Good Shepherd carrying the sheep on his shoulder. It's a reminder that we have no hope but this one. But we are actually, on his behalf, shepherds in his name. And we have a huge power to orientate other souls, at least at certain crucial times. Some are actually commissioned to do that, and many here would be in that state. Parents, teachers. But we can also, in a way, be shepherds through something that we say or even do to someone on the way informally. A word can actually change a life at times. With regard to the specificity of those who are called to be shepherds of others, you parents, think of this. The buck stops here. The father must not abdicate. He must be virile and masculine. After all, in the Christian family, the tradition is that he exercises the authority of God the Father. He has ultimate power to decide and to command. There must be unity and cohesion, as in the monastery. Having listened, his word must be the final one, otherwise there's chaos. That's correct order, that's all. And also, the Father has the power of God the Father in him, like a priest, to bless his children. And he should do so, especially when they're small, making the sign of the cross on their forehead, especially at the end of the day. He also has the power of God the Father to bless the table. That goes back to even Old Testament days. In the Christian life, that means, yes, he can make the sign of the cross, and that is acknowledged by the Father who places there. The Father to exercise his paternal authority for the domestic church. It's important. In the Hebrew way of life, the meal was sacred. St. Joseph, on the eve of the Shabbat, would have exercised that role, the sacred meal, bringing the eve of the Shabbat on Friday evening. How different from those who have on the television when they're eating. In Italy, I always used to tell young couples who came for their retreat before marrying in the monastery, never ever have the television on during meals. It's sacred. Teachers, too, have a huge authority. One does not just hand on an academic discipline. It's true, a good teacher will hand on what he knows and do it well. It's a professional job he has and he has to do it well. But he also hands on something of himself. I still remember the words that some of our teachers, even in the secondary school, would put in now and again to remind us that we're not just learning some material. Our English teacher coming out with things like this in English: swearing is a lazy use of language. Remember that. He was inviting us to be full, complete, cultured human beings, able to use the power of our language without falling back on the vulgar. I still remember also some of the things that headmasters would say over the years in the morning assembly. We had one headmaster who would always come into the assembly before the bulk of the school did, and he was already seated there in front of us all with his gown and looking at us as we came in, and therefore instilling what? Stillness. We never talked because he was looking at us. There might be some music playing as we came in, but he would come out with a Christian message, including this one. There are very few moments in the day when you are alone with your thoughts. Let us keep it that way in the assembly. And he would give just a word for the day, and it would have an effect. But then the minister and the priest. One headmaster we had would about once or twice a week call in one of the local ministers, one of the local clergy, to talk to the whole school, about 750 pupils. We would all listen. And I still remember some of their messages. One had this to say: when are you grown up? What is a grown-up? And 750 pupils scratched their heads and couldn't think what he was getting at. He asked this and that question, and then he gave his own answer. A man is grown up when he wants to do good. Another, a different clergyman, came in with this message. He was responsible in his area for discerning vocations. And he talked about what he heard when he interviewed the young men. They all said this in one shape or form: I hear a call. I am being called. And he asked us what that meant, and explained what being called could mean to a young man. Which brings me to where I want to land. Some young people are actually being called. At times, all it's needed is just a word at the right time, but it's not enough even then, because there is confusion and one doesn't know where to go or what to do. Forgive me, but I'll go into just one little detail which hit me just these last days, because I was in the Martyr Hospital and I absolved my old abbot. I don't think he's going to live very long. He just about recognized me. But I want to share this with you because it shows perhaps to you as well, how important a word can be and an act at the right time and can change a whole life. Things, when we're young, are in our hands, if we're honest. And that's why I quote Oscar Wilde to start off with today. He had this famous one-liner, "I'm not young enough to know everything." I wouldn't listen to anyone, especially not my parents. What do they know? I did it my own way. I wouldn't listen. 10 years later, it hadn't worked out. Partly my own fault. But then what happens? A lot of things happened, but one thing made a big difference. It's when somebody else stepped in. And it was when at last I began to listen and realised I had to listen to get out of the mess, that things actually started to make sense and to work. My spiritual father pulled out of his pocket after Mass, the Welsh Mass, he spoke Welsh, a letter from Ireland. He'd written to Kilnacrot nearby. "Here, if you want to take it up, it's up to you." I had no clue that was going on. Didn't even know it existed. And then my mother received a phone call. When I came back, she said a certain Father Kevin Smith had phoned. He was in Wales, in Cardiff, and would like to meet you. So I went to meet him. I found this man. I could see straight away that he was made of care. He was kind, and my soul mattered to him. He just calmly said, "Come over on the 6th of September. He fixed everything, and I came. On the 7th was ordained at Kilnacrot Brother Thomas. And then followed the first Mass on the 8th. The abbot, the same man, Kevin Smith, preached. And I remember that sermon, which made a huge difference and possibly changed everything in the course of one sermon. Do you know what he said? He gave, in a nutshell, the whole spirituality of St. Norbert about what the priesthood is, explaining how sublime, divine it is, and ended up with one sentence straight from St. Norbert. "Priest of God, what are you? You are nothing. You are everything." And that word echoed through the air into my ears, into my heart, into my brain. And this came as a result. The thought, only a thought. All you've got to do is say yes to the grace that's in the air. That man will take care of you and you'll get there. Sometime later, after novitiate and vows, I was kneeling before him and he had his mitre on in the sanctuary. And he said this, "You will study, you will be ordained a priest." And I heard echoing through the air, man and God combined, for he had power to make it happen. Then, a few days later, he said, "Come here, I want to see you." And he said in one sentence, "We're sending you to Rome." I jumped around him, squeezed him hard, and said, "It's just like what happened when my brother was in school. A telegram came and said he's got an exhibition in Oxford." I was so happy. And then a few days later he said, "Have you got a typewriter? Take this." Give me a brand new electric modern typewriter with a memory. And I said, "Abbot, you're an angel." And he said, "We try to be." And all through the time in Rome, he wrote letters encouraging and guiding. That was care. It made a huge difference. I just finished. Sometime later in Rome, I was in actually bed, and somebody came to the door and knocked. I opened, and it was the rector of the house, the Norbertine College in Rome. "Oh, you're in bed. It doesn't matter. What's the matter, rector?" Well, the Abbot General and I have been talking. Do you know that your community is in difficulty? What's going on? The Abbot is going to have to step down, probably. Oh, yes. So a few days later, I went to the Irish College nearby and talked at length to Cardinal Daly. I wanted advice. Your Abbot, this very day, has just stepped down. Cardinal, what must I do? His reply was more or less this: there's going to be an awful mess out there. Is there any way you can stay here? So I did. Again, the word of a man of God changed everything and kept me safe. Ordained out in Italy and stayed there for years. Do you see how at last, because just for the first time, not doing it myself and listening to somebody who had what? Grace of state, things worked. It applies to you too, my friends. God gives a special grace sometimes to those who shepherd souls. Listen to them and listen to the grace in the air, especially those of you who are young, because you only have one life, and the time will come when you too will be there under the grave. There will be peace, but where will the time have gone? If you're called either to virginity for Jesus or the priesthood, there's nothing more angelic possible, and it's the best possible use we can make of time.